So what shifted in the behavior was, instead of people, trying to separate fights and trying to, stop confrontation, people encouraged confrontation because they could get attention out of it. And that's a very, very sad move in our society, because it just promotes the wrong aspects of masculinity, of, what it means to be a human. We all inherently have within us things that we believe are right and things that we believe are wrong. But a lot of us are conditioned by our environment. Our behaviors are conditioned by our environment and by those around us. So if everyone else is videotaping a fight, if I go in and try and break it up, I am alone. If I videotape that fight, I am with the crowd. And this is just a play on our need to be a part of community and tribe. We all seek community and tribe, like community and tribes in life, because it's part of our genetic makeup, because of throughout history, if we were alone, it was a lot harder to survive. Being a part of a community or a tribe meant that survival was a lot easier, because we pooled resources, because there's protection in numbers and all of this. So it's very important when, knowing one's self-worth, is that I have to determine what that means for me, just like you have to determine what that means for you. So, what are your values? What are your, acceptable and unacceptable limits in life? Like, what do you accept as being acceptable behavior and acceptable culture? And if we understand culture is just our identity and beliefs. Okay? So there are two types of culture that we have. There is our ancestral culture, that is the culture of who our ancestors are, who our lineage is. And then there's the culture that we adopt to become accepted in society. For example, like if you grew up Christian, your culture's rooted in Christian beliefs. If you grew up Muslim, your culture's rooted in Muslim beliefs. But then you have another culture that is the societal culture. So the times, what's trending, what's acceptable and unacceptable behavior, what is the regional behavior or regional mannerisms, what you personally like. So for example, to talk about culture is just, in Australia, it is cultural to drink a lot of alcohol. So it's cultural to binge drink. It's been the culture since the 80s that I know of, where we promoted, drinking beer, drinking rum, drinking spirits, going out, getting plastered on the weekends and all of this. So when I was personally trying to give up alcohol, it always felt like I was giving something up, I was missing something. Until I read a book called Atomic Habits, where the author goes through and explains, the form of habit, but also our habits are what we self-identify with. So, for example, the cultures that are in my external environment are my self-identifiers, or what I self-identify with. So for me to give up alcohol, all I had to do was stop identifying with drinking and that sort of culture, And then I was able to shift my culture to being, something different from drinking. So what I personally did is I changed that culture of going out to the pubs within myself for being present in nature, for, learning. And I had to accept that drinking and, alcohol and stuff like that just wasn't a part of me anymore. And when I accepted that and altered and shifted, that culture within myself, for me to not go out to a bar on a Friday night or a club on a Friday night, I'm not missing anything, because it's not something I self-identify with now as being an activity that gives me joy. And that's sort of one of the things I had to learn, was how to redefine, my culture. Okay, so we're not talking about, our ancestors, because if I tell you about my ancestral culture is rooted in the Celtic people, in the Celtic tribes. That's where my ancestors come from. So, like, for example, Native Americans, their ancestors, are in that Native American culture, and First Nations in Australia, their culture is the First Nations. But if we take, for example, the First Nations, they have their First Nations culture, but then there's the modern Australia culture. If we understand it sort of like that, we all have that. So we all have our ancestry to that link to, the tribes we've come from, while my ancestors and my culture is not as present as First Nation or Native American or Native Inuit, your Eskimos in Canada. My culture is a lot more disjointed and sort of decimated, because if we understand what killed individual cultures throughout history, it was religion. So religion's the one that's seek to destroy ancestral culture. So, back when the Catholic Church was taking root in Italy and stuff like that, the Catholic Church decided that all other belief systems that weren't the Catholic, they seek to destroy them. So they went through Europe and they destroyed all the other belief systems. It's been present throughout history that's what happened. In South America with the Incas and the Aztecs, I'm pretty sure the Aztecs were the ones that looked to destroy the Inca culture and the Inca identity, and then the Spanish came in, and the Spanish destroyed all cultures other than, the Spanish Catholic culture. So we understand that, some of us have our ancestral culture a lot more present in our life, and others of us have to find it. But we have our ancestral culture, and then we have our modern culture. And for example, if you like playing video games, you like technology, you like, let's say science, let's say you like, pop culture and all of that, that becomes your modern culture. So with our modern culture, it's just the culture that we hold to be a part of the communities we want to be a part of in life. So it's not that one is greater than the other. It's just we need to have our own inherent culture personally to be able to align to the right communities and tribes in the modern day, but also understanding and respecting our ancestors is always vital, because that tells us who we are, and that is the story of where we come from. So, for example, if I talk on this, the Celtic people were forest dwellers. They lived among the trees. They lived in forests. They were a part of nature. That is why I have a calling to nature, to be in nature, to be around the trees, to be in the forest. When I am there, I feel connected to them. So there are many activities when we understand our cultures that allow us to reconnect on a personal and spiritual level to where we come from. But it's very important, because until I started diving into this and practicing this, I felt lost, because all I had was the modern culture. I didn't have my ancestors. So when I only have the modern culture, what happens is that becomes my reality of existence. All I know is the last 10, 20, 30 years. All I know is while I've been alive. My ancestral culture is the culture that has been there for thousands of years. That is the reason I am alive. The lineage of ancestors. So it's very important to understand this in your own way, because this is what sort of helps to connect us to life, to the universe, to our identity of God, to, really feeling like we belong. And when I started looking into this and I started working on really understanding my culture, it gave me a sense of belonging and peace. Even though I'm not associated or attached or in communication with that community, I am always in communication to my ancestors, because I know who they are now. And that's an important thing about understanding the self-worth, is understanding the self. Who am I? What means something to me? What is important to me? What do I believe as being right and wrong to me? What are my values? Personally, when we talk about values, my personal values are based around chivalry, are based around knighthood. Like, I identify with the knights of old, with the beliefs that they held of chivalry, of honour, of standing for what you believe in life and accepting any fate. So like, one of the things that, or my personal beliefs that really helps me in life to stay true to who I am, is a belief of honour before death. If I am given the choice to break my code of honour or to die, I will always choose to die before breaking my code of honour. That's just that. For me, if I was to break my code of honour just to exist or live, I would live sort of like how the Ronin lived, the samurais without masters, without meaning, without purpose, without anything. That is what I learnt personally within myself, is that if I break my vows to myself of who I am, I cease to be who I am. So for me, it's very important that I stay true to who I am, because I have experienced life as someone who I am not. if that makes sense. So, like, for me, I had to overcome all of the negative aspects of my childhood to rediscover or find who I wanted to be in life and who I am in life. Nowadays, it is quite easy for me to stand with my values. It is quite easy. And like, when I say this, like, just know, like, there isn't, like, it's not do or die. If I manipulated people when I'm younger, I have to repair that within myself. The reason I manipulated people when I was younger was because I was manipulating myself to believing that that was acceptable behavior. And that's an important thing. To be human is to fall. Like, my standards in life and my values in life are what I aspire to. But it doesn't mean I always reach what I aspire. But I'm never going to stop aspiring to reach them. That's what it means to be human. Even if I fall and I fail and I am weak in moments, I can build back up and I can make it back. Like, it's not an external thing, it's an internal thing. My actions in life have to be remedied by me. And this is a funny thing I realized when I was 18, talking with, I'll give you two scenarios. So this is what helped me truly understand what it meant. So I was working in a bar, and there was two men in that bar that I would talk to. One was an ex-soldier who went over to East Timor, who had killed people in close combat. The other was a bikie who had killed people being associated to being a bikie. Do you sort of get it? Both had committed murder. One did it for their beliefs and values. One did it through pressure and greed. One was at peace with themselves, and one was emotionally destroyed within themselves. When we do things and we act in accordance with what we believe as being right and wrong, we are able to remedy our actions. When we act outside of what we believe as being right and wrong, and we act because others force us to act, we struggle to remedy the situation. The soldier went over to protect and serve other people, went to defend the country. Well, not defend the country, but to serve the country. He was at peace with what he had to do, because if he did not do it, many others would have died. East Timor was full of turmoil. There was violence, there was massacres. The bikie, on the other hand, was haunted and horrid throughout his life by the actions that he had taken, because he could not accept or would not stand to say no, even though in that life the choice isn't there. He was forced to take actions and do things because that's what they do. That's what these criminal organisations do, is they force you to break your moral